Story 1. After my last breakup, I had to move back in with my parents. My ex and I were living together in Boston. In a little apartment, we signed the lease for way too quickly. If I can offer one piece of advice, it is this. Never sign a lease with someone you just started dating. He turned out to be nothing like I thought he was. Now, my parents live in Western Massachusetts. If you have ever been to Massachusetts, you know the further west you go, the more rural it becomes. I have never been much of a country girl. I love being in or close to a city, especially now that I am still in my 20s. But my parents' area is quiet, too quiet. I am hoping this move is just temporary, something to bridge the gap until I can afford a place of my own again. Boston is off the table for obvious reasons, but I just need my own space. In the meantime, I went back to working at the urgent care facility I used to work at before moving. They welcomed me back with open arms, even if it is just until I move again. The downside of this job is the hours. I have been stuck working overnight shifts. The work itself is easy but mind-numbing, and it completely wrecks my sleep schedule and social life. Not that there is much of a social life to mess up around here. After my shifts, I sometimes stop for what is essentially my dinner. Usually, it is takeout since not much is open at those hours. Early this morning, I got off work around 4 a.m. and decided to swing by a bagel shop that opens super early. They serve all kinds of food, so I grabbed a chicken sandwich and a salad to eat when I got home. I also needed gas, so I stopped at the Shell station on my way back. It is one of the few stations open at that hour. This gas station has a huge parking lot, but I almost never see cars there, even during the day. I went inside to pay cash because it is cheaper, then walked back out to the pump. While I was fueling up, a blue sedan pulled into another pump a few spots over. A man got out and started fueling his car, locking the handle so the gas would keep pumping automatically. Then, out of nowhere, he walked over to me and said, "Hey, want to see something funny?" I instantly regretted making eye contact. Still, I found myself mumbling, "What is it?" He started doing that dumb trick where you pretend to pull your finger off by bending it a certain way. He kept looking at his hands and then back at me with this weird, sarcastic smile. I could not tell if he thought it was funny or if he knew how ridiculous he looked. Either way, I gave him a forced laugh, hoping he would take the hint and leave. He did not. Even when I turned away, he just kept at it, like he was waiting for me to be amazed. As soon as I felt the nozzle click, signaling my tank was full, I wasted no time putting it back and heading inside to get my change. When I came back out, the man was gone, but his car was still there, and the gas was still pumping. I hurried back to my car, checked the back seat out of sheer paranoia, and locked the doors. The drive home only took about 5 minutes. Once I got there, I used the spare key from its hiding spot to let myself in. After locking the door behind me, I stashed the key back where it belonged. I was starving, so I went straight to the kitchen to eat. I always try to be quiet when I get home late, so I do not wake my parents. But just as I started eating, I heard the front door unlock and then open. I froze mid-bite, listening. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" but got no reply. No footsteps. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I ran to the foyer to check, but no one was there. Heart racing, I bolted upstairs to my parents' bedroom and woke them up, panicking as I explained that someone had just come into the house. My dad jumped out of bed and rushed downstairs, turning on every light as he went. My mom and I followed close behind. When he went to check the spare key, it was gone. My mom was horrified, though she still managed to scold me for not being more careful. My dad started searching every room in the house. As he finished checking my brother's old room, I stayed behind to double-check a few spots he might have missed. I did not really expect to find anything, but when I crouched down to peek under the dining room table, there he was, the man from the gas station. I screamed louder than I ever thought possible, and my mom joined in. My dad came running up the stairs, ready to fight. The man crawled out from under the table and started struggling with my dad, who was 20 years older than him. My mom and I jumped in, punching and hitting him however we could. Eventually, he gave up and ran out the front door. We called the police, who thankfully arrived quickly, but the man still had our spare key. That night, the police parked a car in our driveway to deter him from returning. My dad wedged a chair under the front doorknob and slept in the living room. The next day, he changed the locks, and we stopped hiding a spare key outside. I still feel awful for bringing that man to my parents' home. I am sure he followed me with his lights off because I did not notice any cars behind me on the drive back. I am grateful my family and I are safe, but this experience has only made me more determined to get out of here as soon as I can. Story 2. Driving at night has always been my thing. I cannot stand traffic, and let me tell you, living on Long Island, New York, traffic is no joke. It feels like the roads are permanently clogged. My brother lives down in Florida, and I like to visit him pretty often. The drive is long. Sometimes it takes up to 18 hours depending on when you leave, but I do it to avoid the hassle of flying. Plus, staying for a whole month means I need my own car, so I do not have to depend on my brother to cart me around. I usually plan my trips strategically. I leave Long Island at around 2 in the morning to get ahead of all the rush hour chaos. On this particular Thursday morning, I had everything ready and hit the road at exactly 2 a.m. My first stop was for coffee at Dunkin' Donuts because I needed all the energy I could get for this grueling drive. Once I cleared Long Island, I felt relieved. By the time I was in New Jersey, it was around 3 in the morning, and the roads were smooth sailing. The I-95 would take me straight down to Florida, so once I was on that stretch, I was set. Around 4 o'clock, my stomach started growling, and I realized I had skipped breakfast before leaving. That was a mistake, but who is hungry at 2 in the morning? I pulled off the I-95 as soon as I saw a sign for food. There was a Wendy's listed, and I thought, perfect, I'll grab something quick. I ended up in what seemed like the middle of nowhere in New Jersey. There were no streetlights, and the only illumination came from my car's headlights. When I got to the Wendy's parking lot, a few lights were on, and there was another car parked there. The drive-thru menu was lit up, so I assumed they were open. I sat at the intercom waiting for someone to greet me, but after a minute or so of silence, I figured something was off. I even said, "Hello?" but got no response. Annoyed, I pulled out my phone and looked up their hours. Turns out, they did not open until 6 in the morning. Just as I was groaning about my bad luck, there was a loud knock on my window. I practically jumped out of my skin. I turned to see a man standing there, smiling. He motioned for me to roll down the window. Instinctively, I cracked it just a little, enough to hear him but not enough for him to reach inside. He said, "Hey, they're not open yet." I nodded and said, "Yeah, I just found that out." Then he pointed to the car in the corner of the lot and explained that his battery had died. He asked if I could help him jumpstart his car. I told him I did not have jumper cables, but he quickly reassured me, saying he had some in his trunk. I hesitated. The whole situation felt off, but I did not want to be that person who left someone stranded. Believing in karma, I reluctantly agreed. He stepped back so I could pull my car closer to his. Once our cars were aligned, I popped my hood, and he went to get his cables. We hooked everything up, and I started my car, giving his battery a few minutes to charge. He got into his car to try starting it, but nothing happened. We waited a little longer and tried again. Still nothing. This made no sense, considering he had supposedly just been driving it. Then he said he needed to make a quick call. He stepped away and started speaking in Spanish on his phone. I do not know Spanish, so I could not understand what he was saying, but the low tone of his voice made me uneasy. When he came back, he said his friend suggested we give it a few more minutes. I agreed, though I was starting to feel frustrated and uneasy. Suddenly, the sound of roaring engines filled the air. 2 pickup trucks came speeding into the parking lot from opposite sides of the building. My stomach dropped as I pieced it together. This was a setup. "Oh no," I muttered under my breath. Without thinking, I yanked the jumper cables off my car and slammed my hood shut. But it was too late. The trucks boxed me in, one parked behind me and the other at an angle. The man standing nearby was no longer smiling in a friendly way. His grin turned sinister, sending chills down my spine. I locked my car with my key fob and bolted into the woods next to the parking lot. The darkness was disorienting. Branches scratched my legs, and I tripped over something, landing hard on the ground. I decided to stay down, curling up as small as I could, hoping they would not find me. I could hear voices yelling in Spanish, and they were getting closer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. Eventually, the voices started fading. I stayed put, not moving a muscle until I was sure they were gone. Then, in the distance, I heard my car alarm blaring. Panic set in again. All my belongings were in that car. Clothes, shoes, jewelry. I could not afford to lose everything. After what felt like an eternity, I cautiously made my way back to the parking lot. When I got there, the trucks were gone, along with the man's car. My car was still there, but the rear window had been shattered, and everything inside was gone. My suitcase, the bags in the back seat, all of it gone. I broke down. The stress, fear, and frustration overwhelmed me. I called the police and explained what had happened. They arrived and told me they would get the security footage from Wendy's once it opened. They took my information and said they would be in touch, but I knew it was a long shot. The officer mentioned that the car in the lot had fake plates, and the trucks did not have plates at all. He tried to reassure me that they would do their best, but I could tell he was just trying to give me hope. I drove the 2 hours back home feeling defeated. That drive was the worst of my life. Days later, I got a call from the police, confirming what I already knew. None of my belongings were recovered, and those men were never caught. I still believe in karma, though. Those men will get what is coming to them someday. As for me, I have learned to trust my gut and be much more cautious. The world can be a cruel place, but I am grateful to have made it out of that situation alive. Story 3. We have all taken long road trips before, right? And I am sure we have all passed those rest area signs, debating if we could push through another 20 minutes or if it was time to stop for a quick bathroom break or to stretch our legs. Sometimes you are lucky, and you come across one of those big rest stops with food courts and everything you could need. But more often, depending on where you are left with a tiny building, just big enough for some basic bathrooms, and that is about it. I was on one of those grueling 15-hour drives, and to make it worse, most of it was overnight. I will spare you the exact details of where I was going. It does not matter much, but I will tell you that I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere on the east coast of the U.S. It was late at night, and the highway was basically empty. It was rare to even spot another car at that hour. After hours behind the wheel, I hit that uncomfortable stage where I really needed to use the bathroom, and I was feeling restless from sitting for so long. I kept my eyes peeled for one of those blue rest area signs, and when I finally spotted one, it felt like a gift from above. A few miles later, I pulled into the small rest stop. It was one of those bare-bones ones, but it had a bathroom building, and that was all I cared about. There was only one other car parked there. I figured the driver might be sleeping inside, but I could not tell because the windows were tinted. As I got out of my car, I stretched my legs and glanced over at the car out of curiosity. Not much to see, so I headed into the bathroom. When I walked inside, I immediately froze. There was a man standing in the corner of the bathroom. He had his back to me, and his head was tilted down. At first, I thought he was at the urinal, but then I realized he was just standing there, facing the corner of the wall. The whole scene was bizarre. I almost asked if he was okay, but the vibe was too off. I felt uneasy just being near him, but I had no choice. I had to walk past him to get to the stall. Keeping my head down and my pace normal, I went in, closed the door, and tried to handle my business. But I could not relax. It was so silent in there, and his presence just made the whole situation too creepy. I stood there for a minute, trying and failing, and eventually decided to just flush the toilet to make it seem like I had finished. When I stepped out of the stall, the man had turned around. Now he was staring right at me. His face was something I will never forget. His eyes, especially, had this haunting look, and his expression was completely blank. I did not know what to say or do. My brain just panicked, and I hurried out of the bathroom without saying a word. I got to my car, started it up, and backed out as quickly as I could. But as I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw him. He had walked out of the bathroom and was heading toward my car. My heart raced as I sped out of there, not even looking back. Even after I was back on the highway, my nerves were shot. I still had to use the bathroom, but I figured I could make it another 20 minutes to the next rest area. And thankfully, I was right. It was about 20 minutes later when I saw another rest stop. This one looked almost identical to the first one, but there were no cars in the parking lot. That was a relief. I parked directly in front of the bathroom, rushed inside, and finally got to do what I had been needing to do for so long. It felt like such a relief, at least at first. But just as I was finishing up, I heard the door to the bathroom creak open. I figured someone else had come in to use the facilities, but the footsteps did not stop at the urinals. They came straight to my stall and stopped right in front of it. My heart dropped. I looked down through the crack at the bottom of the stall door, and I could see a pair of shoes just standing there. At first, I froze. Then my mind started racing. Could it be the same guy from the last rest area? Did he follow me here? I finally worked up the nerve to say, "Someone's in here," hoping it would scare them off. But they did not say anything. No response. That is when I knew I was in real trouble. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and put it on speaker, making sure the person could hear the operator answer, "911. What is your emergency?" I said loudly, "I am being followed by a dangerous man. I feel threatened." I think that did the trick because the person immediately turned and left the bathroom. My hands were shaking as I explained everything to the operator. I told them I would feel safer staying in the bathroom until the police arrived, and they agreed. When I finally heard a knock at the bathroom door and a voice saying it was the police, I felt a wave of relief. I came out and described everything: the man, his car at the first rest area, and the creepy encounters at both stops. The officer checked my car with me to make sure nothing was tampered with. Once everything seemed safe, we both left the rest area at the same time. The officer eventually turned off the highway, and I continued my trip. The rest of the drive was thankfully uneventful, but that night is burned into my memory. I have never been followed like that before, and to this day, I am convinced it was the same man. It was one of the scariest experiences of my life, and it is a reminder that something like this can happen to anyone,